particularly want to thank Lisa and the team at ISKME for inviting me here to do some thinking with all of you today. I also look forward to connecting and hope you'll share your thoughts with me later and throughout the conference. Today, I want to tell you a story about how we have used human-centered design principles to build our education diplomacy work at the State Department. I also want to invite you to help build the next part of that work with us. In fall 2012, a few colleagues and I started work on what became the Open Book Project, an effort to expand access to open educational resources in the Middle East and North Africa. We worked with a number of partners, including ISKME, to get the project started, and we were delighted when Secretary Clinton announced it with the Arab League in January 2013. Almost immediately after the speech was finished, my colleagues and I came back to the question that had led us to the Open Book Project in the first place. Why isn't the State Department doing more work on education around the world? Supporting education is the right thing to do, but it's also the smart thing to do. Education is closely linked to some of the biggest priorities that we have: broad-based economic growth, building stable societies, and supporting civic participation. And the evidence is pretty clear. We know individual income gains are estimated to be 10 to 15% from every additional year of school. The impact of education on women and girls' health is also equally great, decreasing maternal and child mortality and increasing the likelihood of greater income and social equality. And we've seen the impact that our programs can have. 53 alumni of our Fulbright program have gone on to win Nobel Prizes, and many of them along the way have credited the Fulbright program with giving the opportunities and experiences that they needed to succeed. As we looked, the new opportunities were also pretty obvious. The demand for education at all levels around the world has never been greater. UNESCO estimates that the world needs an estimated 6.8 million teachers in the years ahead to meet the demand for education. US students and educators are more involved in taking a global outlook in their work than ever before, and more than 289,000 students studied abroad at the collegiate level last year. And the internet revolution is making the sharing of educational resources like OER easier and cheaper than ever before. And US educators are creating incredible new tools, techniques, and methods that could have an impact all around the world. So it was clear that we had an incredible opportunity to increase access to high-quality education. What was less obvious was how we could do that. Our first challenge is probably one that many of you are familiar and can empathize with. We had no new money and no new staff. We would have to figure out how to do more using the limited resources that we had. Our second challenge is the network nature of the State Department, which I think will probably resonate with many of you too. While most people think about the State Department as the Secretary of State and our staff in Washington, the majority of our staff are abroad, and the majority of our work every day happens abroad. The actual implementation of policy is done by the almost 70,000 staff of the department. For an issue like this, our work is actually very decentralized. We knew that we couldn't make education the job of one or two or even a few hundred people. We had to make education relevant to the jobs of almost everyone in the department. And given that our resources were limited, we had to make sure that what we offered them added value to the work that they do every day. It couldn't just be another request from Washington. It had to be something that everyone saw as supporting their objectives. And we had to give them the tools to act autonomously. So we got to work. We started by interviewing staff at our embassies. We asked them how education fit into their work now, what challenges they faced, and what they wished we could help them do. The number one request that they wanted a place where they could talk with their colleagues from different areas of work, where officers working on economic issues could talk with political officers, where people working on international development could talk with people doing public diplomacy. They wanted a space to get together. The second request, they wanted to know what was working for their colleagues at other embassies around the world. For example, staff at our embassies have created some incredible programs, everything from using Duolingo to support classroom language learning instruction in Central America, to programs that offer students assistance in taking standardized tests in the Middle East. This led us to two conclusions. The first is that our guess about education needing to be on everyone's agenda was not only correct, but more correct than we had initially thought. The second is that no matter how effective ideas from the field may be, many don't spread. It's difficult to not see how interrelated these challenges are. These requests gave us the basis for designing an initiative that encouraged our staff around the world to work on education. Based on their needs, my colleagues and I put together a few big offers. To make it relevant, we pulled together clear arguments tying work on education back to many of the major foreign policy objectives that we have, connecting people across cultures, fostering economic growth, and so on. We started an interactive toolkit with the best examples of how embassies use their existing resources to more effectively support education around the world. As we started building the toolkit, we also invited staff in to help us build that. We invited them to salons in DC, where we could sit and talk about what their experiences are and capture them, capture the expertise that they have. Last but not least, we started an open internal community of practice, where staff at any level, from ambassador to entry-level officer, can come together to work, to seek advice on problems they're facing, and to share the new ideas that they think can make a difference. In return for all of this, we ask for just two things from them. First, we ask that every embassy needs a way for its education work to be coordinated across all of its areas of work. Again, so that the education work that our economic officers are doing is tied to and shared with the people working in other parts of the embassy. Second, we ask that each embassy share with us in DC what they're doing on education diplomacy, and also share it in a way that we can give it to all of the other embassies. So working with the Secretary's staff, we sent these offers and these requests out in a policy guidance cable, which is our kind of instruction of sorts. We sent it out in October, and it's amazing what we've already seen. Even though these efforts are just nascent, we can see signs of success. Soon after our embassies started their conversations, officers started to share their surprise and their excitement at the intersections with their colleagues' work. And more importantly, they told us stories about the inspiring new collaborations that are happening inside the State Department, which I look forward to sharing some more of as they come to fruition. Even though we're asking some people to do something new and we're asking others to do something different, people are excited. For me, that's proof that this human-centered way of designing a new policy initiative can work. So far, I've only told you one half of the story, though. I've told you the half of the story about how we foster collaboration amongst ourselves. Now I want to talk about the other half, the part that isn't fully written yet. Working just with ourselves isn't enough. Education diplomacy is an art that we all, as educators and citizens, practice every day. Every time a US institution or educator works with a school or classroom overseas, as we've seen so many examples of today, it builds bridges between people and cultures. And US institutions that open their doors to international students and exchange students are helping to train the next generation of leaders, entrepreneurs, and innovators. Civil society organizations build bridges every time they help spread educational innovations from one country to another, especially when they create new ways for content and methods to be localized and adapted. With so many people working in this area, it isn't always possible for us at the State Department to have a one-to-one relationship with each institution. Sometimes it isn't even desirable or necessary. Sometimes the best role we can play is convening, matchmaking, and sharing information. Which brings us to the second question in our design process. How do we build the next great educational collaboration? Where can we work together with educators, institutions, and innovators outside the State Department? And how does the State Department make sure that we're playing the right role? So far, my colleagues and I have done a series of interviews with companies, institutions, educators, and individuals to hear what they think it's like working with the State Department and our embassies on education. We heard a number of challenges, all of which I think are fundamentally linked to the issue of communication. Our goals aren't always clear. People aren't able to find the right contact at the embassy or at the department to discuss working together. And the ways that others can work with us, ranging from grants to partnerships to information sharing, aren't clear or intuitive. And we learned about some ways that we can be smarter, too. We learned that we can make it easy to find and get in touch with the right person. We found new ways that we can help spread techniques and tools that we have seen work. So where are we now? Well, we've started putting some of these ideas in place, but I think it's just the beginning. I'll offer one quick example. Since August 2013, our embassies have been hosting MOOC camps, which are facilitated in-person discussions built around existing online courses. We've hosted more than 200 of them in 65 countries around the world, everywhere from the Democratic Republic of the Congo to South Korea. This fall, we released our facilitator documentation on the program into the public domain so that other people can learn and can share their lessons about similar models and approaches, but most importantly, so that we can foster better in-person and online learning. This is just one example, but I think it will be the first of many, and I know that there are many others on the horizon. I want to acknowledge that these are the early days of our work on education diplomacy, and only time will tell if we succeed. Like many of you and many of the works that you do, I think we'll see the impact of our education diplomacy work in 10 or 20 years, not 6 months from now. Yet we know that education is a gateway to a better, more peaceful, and more just world. And we know that we all have a duty, no matter what our role, to ensure that the next generation will feel the same responsibility and drive to leave the world better than they have found it. We know we at the State Department have an important role in building a future where everyone can learn. In partnership with educators and institutions, we can help everyone learn, grow, and build a better, more globally interconnected environment that we will be proud to pass on to our children. So in closing, I want to invite you to all come join us in writing this next part of the story. Tell us what your education diplomacy experiences have been like, either working with us or on your own. And tell us what you think we could be doing better. And above all, come tell us how you want to collaborate with us. I'll be here throughout the rest of the week, but I'm also available on email. It's Kruchoski, PH, at state.gov. I know the Polish names are hard, but I promise it's spelled right in the program. So thank you all again, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.